Alright, so let's continue with our trend lines lesson part 2. Now there are some factors that you can refer to determine whether the trend line is strong or not, because there are some trend lines which are not so strong, and then there are some trend lines that are very significant and very strong. Okay, now basically what does it mean by a strong trend line? A strong trend line is a trend line that when it is broken, it is going to result in a new trend being formed. Okay, and the price is going to move for a long time before it reverses the trend again. This is what I mean by a strong trend line. Now the first thing you need to take note of is the angle and the slope of the trend line. So the steeper the slope of the trend line, the less reliable it is. Okay, now there's no specific angle as to what angle is considered steep, but I would say if it goes above 50 degrees, then it's a bit too steep. Okay, and the breakout of steep trend lines are often fake breakouts. Normally, when the price breaks a very steep trend line, it will go sideways a little bit and then continue to go in the same direction of the whole trend. Or it can break for 1 or 2 candles, then it continue in the same direction. So let me give you one example. You can see this trend line over here. Is this considered steep or not very steep? If I draw another one over here based on this few points, now you can tell. Okay, I know it's not straight, but which one is more steep? Definitely the first one, this one. Okay, so you can see price broke this trend line in H1 and it went up for a while. It didn't start an uptrend, and then it continued going on a downtrend move. So you can say that this is just a temporary retracement or a very short bullish trend. Give you one example again. This trend line, as compared to just now, is less steep. Okay, and hence you can say that this trend line is more significant or stronger than the previous trend line. Okay, because if I draw another steep trend line over here, you can see like that, right? Price only went up a little bit and then it came back down. But when it broke this trend line that is less steep, price went on an uptrend. So take note of the angle. So another example over here, bullish trend, you can easily spot which is the steeper one, which is this one. Okay, steep trend line, price broke below, it retraced a little bit, and then it continues to go on a bullish move. Whereas for this trend line that is less steep, price broke over here and then a new downtrend is formed. One thing you need to take note is that if this occurs right at the end of the trend, for example, you see price forming bearish candlestick signals, and also you see a bearish divergence. When it breaks this steep trend line, it's really time to get out. Okay, because when price goes up at a steep trend just like that, high chance price will become more and more overextended. And the thing about sharp trends is that it is normally very short term. It is not sustainable. And sharp trends, when it breaks the trend line, it can be broken easily. So when you see this kind of upward move where the price shoot upwards, then maybe it's time to get out. Okay, so you can see by now, steep trend lines, they are not really strong support areas. Okay, it's like having a very weak foundation or very weak floor. This is what steep trend lines are. You can see that one over here where it broke below, it kind of went downwards a little bit, only a little bit. Another steep trend line over here, it broke and then it went downwards a little bit. This steep trend line over here, it broke and then it went downwards and then tested this major trend line. And when the price finally broke below 100 SMA and below the major trend line, a new downtrend is formed. Okay, so you can see that trend lines with smaller angles, they tend to be stronger, and also they tend to normally last longer than steep trend lines. Okay, second factor is to look at the number of test points. Okay, the higher the number of test points or touch points, the more reliable and stronger the trend line. And a strong trend line is defined as a trend line that touches at least 3 points, okay? Or can say it's a valid trend line. So example over here, 1, 2, 3, and then a couple more here. Here as well, here as well, and here as well. So would you say, is this a strong trend line or a weak trend line? So combine what you learned just now, the angle as well as the amount of touch points. Definitely, this is a strong trend line. So if the price does break above this trend line, be prepared for a new uptrend to be formed, okay? Of course, it's not guaranteed. Doesn't mean that if it breaks a strong trend line, then for sure a new trend is going to form. Sometimes there will be false breakouts, okay, which you are going to learn how to spot in the next lesson. Now the thing is, you don't really need to count exactly only the points that touch the trend line, okay, because when the price approaches near the trend line, you can also count that as a touch point, okay. The third factor you need to take note of is duration. Now this is a little bit interlinked to the number of touch points, because normally the more amount of touch points there are, the longer it will last. And again, the longer it lasts, the more touch points you have. So understand that the longer it takes to form the trend line, the stronger it is, and higher time frame trend lines tend to be more significant. So if you have two trend lines with the same length, same amount of touch points, let's say assuming everything is the same, angle is the same, everything is the same except for the time frame. Let's say the first one appears in H1, second one appears on daily time frame. Which one is stronger then? The answer would be the one on the daily time frame, okay? Which means that when the price breaks the daily time frame trend line, there will be a higher chance that a new trend is going to be formed as compared to if it breaks the H1 trend line, okay? Long trend lines tend to be more significant than short trend lines, okay? So you can see example over here. The first trend line and then the second trend line. Now you can see that the first trend line, it lasted only for about a week, and the number of touch points 1, 2, and 3. And this is the longer trend line over here, which lasted for more than a week, okay? Also have around the same amount of touch points. So which one do you think is stronger? Now if you think about this, the first one lasted shorter, second one lasted longer, and most importantly, first one, the angle is steeper as compared to the second trend line. So which one do you think is a stronger trend line? For sure, the second one. You can see that price broke this first trend line. It only went above for a little while, and then it continued to go back down. Whereas when it broke the stronger trend line, yes, price would retrace for a while, which is normal, but then a new uptrend is formed. So if I'm to ask you right now, based on this chart, based on how I drew the trend line, is this a strong or weak trend line? First thing first, look at the angle. Is it very steep? Not too steep. Number of touch points, 1, 2, 3, which makes it a valid trend line. And most importantly, how long did it last? From 23rd August until 17th September, almost 1 month. So do you think this is a strong trend line? For sure, okay? You don't want a trend line that lasts for 1 day, 2 days, for example, like this one over here, okay? That's why I don't really draw all these minor trend lines, because there's no point. Because they are not that strong anyway, so I feel that there's no point drawing them. But if you want to draw them, feel free to draw it. Give you one more example. Is this a strong or weak trend line? Now I shifted to the H4 time frame, a larger time frame. Again, look at all your criteria. Tested 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 5 over here. Okay, is this a steep trend line? Not very steep. How long did it last? From about end of May until where it broke over here, which is August. Lasted for more than 2 months. So is this a strong or weak trend line? Definitely a strong trend line. Okay, so you take note of that. Now the thing about drawing trend lines is that you need to be careful, because sometimes when the markets become too volatile, just like that, and you're trying to draw a trend line based on that point, okay, some people might draw it like that and then try to take into account the volatile candle. Whereas for the first trend line that I drew here, I'm taking into account the touch points that are not too volatile, like over here and over here. Now if you study statistics, you'll know that when a certain data point deviates too much from the average, you need to ignore it. In statistics, this is called outliers, in which you need to eliminate from your analysis. So same thing when it comes to drawing trend lines, ignore the outliers. Now let me give you one more example over here. Okay, look at this angle, not too steep. You have a trend line that lasts pretty long, and you have your 3 touch points. But on the 4th touch point over here, it is a false breakout. Now you can see that even for a strong trend line, there will be false breakouts. Even though the 5 EMA broke below the trend line, telling you that this is a real breakout, but then it turns out that this is a false breakout. So there are ways for you to determine whether this is a real breakout or not. You'll learn that in the next lesson. But for now, just understand that when it comes to drawing trend lines, to be good in it, you gotta practice as much as possible. At first, at the start, it might be a little bit confusing, it might be hard, but then with practice, it's gonna become second nature to you, okay? So with that, I'll talk to you in the next lesson. Bye.